Osama Bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda and the organization responsible for the attacks on September 11, 2001, was shot dead and buried on May 2, 2011, by members of the United States military. During a raid on the compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, where he and several members of his family were hiding out, members of the United States Special Operations Command located and apprehended him. Following the completion of the identification process, his remains were transferred to the U.S. Carl Vinson before being interred that same day in the Northern Arabian Sea. Before we move further, subscribe to our channel. Let's continue. When determining where and how to bury Bin Laden's body, the United States took into account a variety of variables, including political, religious, and practical considerations. There was concern that his grave could become a shrine for his devotees if it was located on land and he was laid to rest there. It was necessary to observe Islamic burial rituals, such as the tradition of burying a deceased person's body within 24 hours after the time of their death. There was also the matter of whether or not the United States should take photographs or provide some other form of visual evidence that he had passed away. In the Situation Room of the White House on May 1, 2011 in Washington, District of Columbia, President Barack Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and members of the National Security Team get an update on the mission against Osama bin Laden. The justifications provided by the United States government for why they did not bury Osama bin Laden in the earth after he was killed by U.S. forces at the age of 54 were a little bit inconsistent. Officials from the United States, both on and off the record, were mentioned in news sources as saying that the United States did not want him to have a physical cemetery because it might become a shrine, but also because an unnamed country had denied to receive his remains. The officials added that the United States did not want him to have a physical grave because it might become a shrine. There was widespread speculation in the media that the country in question was Saudi Arabia, where bin Laden was born. I'm not sure where this rumor comes from, but I would not give it much credence, says Ambassador Aqbar Ahmed, head of Islamic Studies at American University and a former Pakistani High Commissioner to the United Kingdom and Ireland. Ahmed served in both of these roles. The Saudis are inclined toward a form of Islam called Wahhabism, he continues, which condemns shrines of great people. The Saudis are inclined toward Wahhabism. The fact that bin Laden was extremely critical of Saudi Arabia, in addition to the reality that Saudi Arabia would not want his tomb to become a shrine in their country, leads Ahmed to the conclusion that if U.S. officials ask the kingdom to take bin Laden's remains, they ask out of ignorance. According to Ahmed, the fact that shrines are regarded as important symbols in that region means that burying bin Laden in the location of northwest Pakistan, where special forces were able to kill him, would not be ideal from the standpoint of the United States. The United States government came to the conclusion that burying bin Laden at sea would prevent his grave from becoming a significant symbol for those who support him. Despite the fact that this is not how the vast majority of Muslims choose to bury their dead, U.S. officials stated that measures were taken to bury him in accordance with Islamic customs. At the White House press briefing on Osama bin Laden's killing and burial, John Brennan, who was at the time the assistant to the president for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism, stated that U.S. officials had consulted the appropriate specialists and experts in order to ensure that the burial of bin Laden's remains was done in strict conformance with Islamist precepts and practices. Within 24 hours of bin Laden's death, his body was washed, a white cloth was wrapped over it, a traditional prayer was said over him with the assistance of an Arabic interpreter, and then he was buried. Different Muslim scholars and authorities held differing views regarding whether or not it was acceptable to bury him at sea. Others maintain that funerals at sea should only take place in the event that a person passes away while at sea. In all other cases, the body should be buried on land with the head pointing in the direction of Mecca, which is the place where the Prophet Muhammad was born. Others stated that Islam is a pragmatic religion that allows for exceptions to be made in certain situations, and that a burial at sea was acceptable in light of bin Laden's renown and the fears that his grave may become a shrine if it was left unattended for too long. Even though it was held on a massive Navy aircraft carrier with hundreds of crew members, only a small group of people were present for the funeral service for bin Laden. According to emails sent by members of the military that were made public by the Department of Defense in 2012 in response to a Freedom of Information Act complaint, fewer than a dozen of the leaders aboard the Carl Vinson were aware that the burial was even taking place. When the United States stated that Osama bin Laden had been killed, the question arose as to whether or not it should share images of bin Laden's body, which officials claimed to have, in order to disprove the widespread belief that bin Laden was still alive. President Barack Obama gave an interview to the CBS program 60 Minutes in which he discussed the reasons behind his decision not to release the documents. It's important for us to make sure that very graphic photos of somebody who was shot in the head are not floating around as an incitement to additional violence or as a propaganda tool, he added. It's important for us to make sure that these photos are not being used as an incitement to additional violence. That's not the kind of people we are. This kind of thing is not displayed as trophies by our company. The United States handled the deaths of Saddam Hussein's two sons in 2003 in a manner that contrasted sharply with the choice to not reveal photographs and the attempt to provide Bin Laden an Islamic burial. In 2003, the United States did not attempt to offer Bin Laden an Islamic burial. After the deaths of Uday and Qusay Hussein, the United States military distributed graphic photographs depicting the bodies of the two men. They also permitted news organizations to photograph the bodies, which is against Islamic custom. They embalmed the dead, which is forbidden in Islam, and they left the bodies unburied for more than a week. Many Iraqis found this insulting because it gave the impression that the United States was making a conscious effort to dishonor the bodies of Muslims. Islamic scholars believe that a proper burial should take place for a deceased individual, even if that individual was executed for committing a crime. Officials from the United States claim that the burial of Bin Laden, despite the fact that it was met with criticism, constituted an attempt to uphold that ideal. It is customary for bodies to be carried to graves in coffins in countries that follow Islamic law. Once they have arrived at their destination, the bodies are removed from their coffins, covered in shrouds, and buried on the right sides with the deceased facing the direction of Mecca, the holy city. Only in extraordinary circumstances, such as when a body must be disposed of from a ship that cannot reach shore in a fair length of time, would burials at sea be permitted. Imam Dr. Abdul Sajid, who resides in the United Kingdom and serves as the chairman of the Muslim Council for Religious and Racial Harmony, suggests that the following 4 important steps should be taken: washing, draping in a white cloth, praying in a prescribed manner, and burial. According to him, the presence of an imam at the funeral is not required. Nonetheless, the rituals must be performed by Muslims, at least one of whom must know the minimum basic Muslim law of burial. According to him, it is hard to know whether or not any such person was present given the minimal information that has been presented, but he also asks whether the body should have been buried at sea given the circumstances. It is proper, according to him, to carry out a funeral at sea when someone dies while on a sea journey. However, there was no rational basis for doing so in this particular instance. According to his line of reasoning, the authorities in the United States should have been able to locate someone, such as a member of the expansive Bin Laden family or even one of the numerous fans of his evil philosophy, who would have been willing to give the body a decent burial. Share your opinions with us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more interesting videos.